Cool. So yeah, this was born out of a few of my friends asking about some stuff that I've talked about here and there of like, hey, I'm really into this fire movement or whatever. It was like been a few years while that's been going on, and I definitely treated it more as my like veganism or CrossFit or whatever, where like I didn't want to impose it upon people. But since some friends had reached out, I ended up putting this all together and now just started to share it a bit more broadly. My main qualifier here is I'm not a certified financial advisor or anything like that. This is a bunch of information that I've like strung together over years of like being into this stuff. So take it with a grain of salt, and then hopefully it can be useful and be applied to your life. It's been really helpful for Chelsea and I. And it's one of those things that once you get a hang of it, as well as set up your own machine, there really isn't much to do anymore. So it's just like it runs, you work, you forget about it. You check in every once in a while to see how it's going. But that's why I really like talking about it, because I invest all this time to learn this stuff. And then now I get some more value from sharing with friends. So this class has 4 sections, and really it's mostly these first 3. And then the last one has a bunch of more advanced topics that we may or may not get into. But this first starts off with thinking about creating a infrastructure and a lens on how you want to build your life, both now and moving forward into the future. And this is a highly personal thing. It's really about the lifestyle you want to live now and later. So it's customized to yourself, but it is important because it's the bedrock and foundation for what you're going to implement as your strategy. And then from there, we'll talk about the accumulation phase, whereby you're making decisions of like, how do I allocate all the different savings that I have to optimize and get you to the place that you want to be. And then we'll deep dive into making money into more money. So getting all into the stonks. Please feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like and stop me. I'll try to take some natural pauses, but just unmute yourself and I'll pay attention to where the Zoom's at, and then we'll go from there. Cool. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll just stop and go right into it. Cool. So first and foremost, I like to play this video because I think it like summarizes pretty succinctly why this stuff matters and what this whole thing is all about. So I'm going to share this and push play.
You get up $2.5 million. Any asshole in the world knows what to do. You get a house with a 25-year roof, an indestructible Jap economy shitbox. You put the rest into the system at 3 to 5% to pay your taxes, and that's your base. Get me? That's your fortress of fucking solitude. That puts you for the rest of your life at a level of fuck you. Somebody wants you to do something? Fuck you. Boss pisses you off? Fuck you. Own your house. Have a couple bucks in the bank. Don't drink. That's all I have to say to anybody at any social level.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it, except the last part. I do condone drinking. But it's really about getting to a place where you can say fuck you to anything. And having that freedom is like really great. And it allows you to do pretty much whatever you want in life. The movement and like how I got into this stuff is called financial independence, retire early. And sometimes they reference retirement. And oftentimes I talk to some people about it and they're like, well, I love my job. Like I'm going to keep working forever. Why do I even care about this? Like, I'm not going to pay attention to it. But it's less either or and more and it's like, yes, I love that you love to do what you want, but why not do that as well as be financially independent so that you're never making suboptimal decisions and trade-offs. Now, I love my job. Casey is my business partner in here and friend, but like it still also is work. And it's nice to like have an idea that like I can make riskier decisions or never really have to do anything unless I want to. And that's like really the philosophy around this stuff. So moving on, this is like really the simple math of it all and will be the foundation of what we're talking through, which is, hey, you make income right now, right? you're making money, you're stacking those checks, and whatever you make on an annualized basis, you're spending that money too. So you're burning through that cash, and then whatever you have left over really is what you have available to save. So pretty fairly simple. But then with that savings, you can do some magic, whether it's like tax advantage allocation, smart investing, or whatnot. And that's what's going to get you what John Goodman was referencing is your fortress of solitude. This is your base. This is what creates passive income that hopefully then covers your burn rate. And then you're on autopilot and you just get to do whatever you want. So this is kind of the math behind it. And we'll just start referencing this and working through it. So there is a Silicon Valley investor named Naval Ravikant. His Joe Rogan podcast is really great. He has his own podcast on wealth creation. And he said there's 3 ways to retirement. And one is you do something you love, you enjoy it so much that it's not work. So you're retired in the sense that you're doing what you like. And that's a really nice aspirational thing, but unfortunately, most of us aren't really at that place. It's always like a balance. Hey, I really like what I do, but there is some shit that I have to do. Alternatively, you can drive your burn rate down to 0, in which you don't need anything to survive. Hey, class over, boom. Just let's all become monks and now we're all retired, right? That's a great way to retire really quickly. Obviously, we all have wants and needs, so that's not drive your burn rate down to 0, but we'll talk about kind of burn rates and how that works through. And then you can have so much money saved that your passive income covers your burn rate. And this is kind of the bedrock of the strategy that we use. For number 3, there's a lot of different ways you can get there. You could real estate invest and you own so much property that is creating passive income for you. You could have a business that you spend 10 minutes on every week and it's cashing in a ton of passive income for you. There's a lot of different ways. We'll talk about a specific way that I leverage and that I can teach the machine that we're working towards, but these are the paths to retirement. So for this class, I am not going to teach you how to become passionate about your work or find what gives you joy. That's not what this is about. I'm also not going to tell you to eat off top ramen all day and whatever, because that's a simple class. But let's actually dive into the burn rate a little bit more, and then we can keep chatting about that. So,
hey Chris,
yeah,
will you get into the idea of what if scenarios? So my 3rd kid becomes a crackhead and I'm having to spend tons of money of rehab on him. How do I potentially factor stuff like that into it?
Yeah, so the way in which you can factor that stuff in is have a more aggressive burn rate as to what you need in order to be financially independent. And what this stuff is I have a target and where we want to be, where I'm okay, now we're financially independent. We'd be able to take the hands off the wheel and be okay. Most likely, I'm probably going to still make income at that point. I'm not going to just straight up not make any more income. I'll probably just go work at a bar or pour beers at a brewery. That sounds really fun. It's just really I get to go do what I want. But for the what if scenarios, yeah, you could bake that in and just be more aggressive about the deep portfolio you want, so that you could have a passive burn rate that covers not just 60 grand, but maybe 100 grand. And then you're covered for all that stuff. So when I do my planning, I do bake that in, but not that specific scenario as to why I need cash. But I do have some padding. It's usually more for lifestyle inflation, because
okay,
I know I like nice things. So we'll see how that goes. Cool.
Thanks.
Great. All right. So talking about understanding your current burn rate, a lot of folks come to this or ask me questions and they want to know about the sexy things, how do you invest, how do you make stuff? But really the unsexy thing is the most controllable and impactful lever that you can work towards is your burn rate. So you either cut down your burn rate now so that you can have way more savings and eat Taco Bell like Jimmy's doing, Yeah. He's on his way to financial independence, baby. Alternatively, like this is also based off of your target independence burn rate is what I'll call it. How much do you need to live off of in order to like sustain the lifestyle that you want? If you have a lower number, you're going to get there faster. And that's just kind of the reality of it. So what I will say is like, you got to understand what your current burn rate is. Like, how much are you spending at the bar every month? Like how much, like, I don't know, that's usually a good example. How much like are you spending on Amazon on a monthly basis and stuff like that? There is a lot of good tooling out there. Mint, you need a budget, personal capital, and it is something that you should invest some time in and consider. So this is the first step. I always tell people like I love talking about this stuff and do a bunch of one-on-one sessions, but this is usually the homework I give folks is you got to figure out your burn rate because I'm not going to sit there and look through all your transactions for the past 6 months to figure out where that stuff is. However, I do have some tools for you. So in this whole course, Andy Dwyer is my like example. So he comes all through, he's 32 years old. He has 0 savings. He's 100% awesome. But we built a budget for him. So there's a link to this super spreadsheet that I have that I leverage. And then let me kind of show you what that looks like. So it's in that folder. It's got a bunch of tabs. There is an annual budgeting summary tab by which you can now start to figure out what your budgets are. So he pays $1,500 in rent. He's got $400 in groceries a month. So you just kind of fill this out. It fills out the annual for you. And then in the monthly budgeting template, it'll carry that over. And then this is designed to be utilized with Mint. So Mint is a free service. You connect all your bank accounts and credit cards to it. And then it has this little link where when you adjust the date, it'll download the transactions, for that date. So on a monthly basis, I download all the monthly transactions. You drop them in here, and then you're able to see what your spending is. So if you look right here, here's a month of spending that that is totally fake and not real spending that Andy has done. So you can kind of see how he did with his budget, right on target with mortgage. His groceries, he spent $80 over what he had budgeted, but his little monthly excess expenses, he had a surplus of $130. So this kind of shows him like, all right, I am tracking to my my annualized burn rate, albeit I was $110 off this month. So he can adjust, try to cut down a little bit more next month, or just know that he's going to be a little bit off on the annual portion. But this is something that you can take advantage of, but I highly recommend you just got to figure out what your burn rate is. So any questions from here?
Real quick, yeah. How do you take into account like expenses that are more annual as opposed to monthly?
It's a good question, TJ. So for example, when I have this for us, our auto insurance, I pay on an annualized basis. So on 1 month, it'll just be way higher. And then all the other months, it's 0. So It's really like what I did for us when I was first building our budgets is I looked at like 3 months of transactions and then built around my current spend. And then I was just like, because I like how we currently live our lives. And I could have been like, okay, now maybe we'll cut this down a little bit more. But instead, I was like, okay, let's just build the budget around our current lifestyle based on where we're at with our goals and stuff. If we did have to save for something big, like a big purchase or something, I would tell Chelsea like, okay, let's cut this restaurant budget from $400 a month to like 0 or something. And then let's do that for a year. But I just basically built around what I currently did. So that would be your choice, but just see where you're at first. And that's the first step to building the correct budget for yourself. Cool. Great. So going back to the presentation, I discovered the big portion of that. Like that master spreadsheet is amalgamation of a few things, but I always link to the source where I got all the retirement modeling stuff. Just because I want to give this guy credit. I found him like a few years back, and this was the one I liked. but we'll kind of talk through how that has been helpful for planning. But ultimately, figure out what your burn rate is, and now you're in your first step to financial acumen. Cool. All right. So what I will say about burn rates is there's this quote that I really like: retirement is when you stop sacrificing today for some imaginary tomorrow. I don't want to just charge towards a number and sacrifice a ton of living during the accumulation phase. I want to live a nice life now, you know, so don't get crazy, or do get crazy, but like, don't feel bad if you start to like have a moderate burn rate and not one where you're having an 80% savings rate and living off of nothing. So what I do say is like, think about what your principles are, because every day when you spend, you should have an understanding of what your goals are so that you make good choices. So with Andy, he knows that he has zero savings right now. So actually a priority for him is to build up a base to like get a bunch of compounding interest going. So he should make some trade-offs. Like he should try not to go out or whatever to have some excess savings. And then when he has a good like base, he's gonna lifestyle inflate. So he's like, okay, if I make more money, I'll increase my discretionary spending by 25%. And that's a really good rule because it gives you money-making goals, but also creates some constraints for yourself so you're not going ham. So this is, again, something that you'll need to figure out for yourself. But I also like advocate for living a pretty, like living now, like don't sacrifice now because it's also life, you know? So on the exact flip side, to contradict myself, there's this guy, Nassim Taleb, who said the three most addictive things is heroin, carbs, and a monthly salary. And this advocates for an understanding that lifestyle inflation happens. So your monthly salary starts to go, and then all of a sudden you're like, I got more money. I'm gonna like go from a Civic to a Tesla. Like I'm gonna start eating at Alinea every day just because I have the liquid cash, but I'm not saving. And that's like the way in which you forever delay your independence, and instead are living paycheck to paycheck, and you just have this like crazy lifestyle. So you get addicted to those monthly gains, and instead of controlling your lifestyle, you let it go ham. So I know I was saying live life in the last slide, but I'm also saying do it responsibly. All right, so we talked through the burn rate, and then let's talk about number 3, which is having that passive income to cover your burn rate. And this is what a lot of this class is about. Again, you have your income minus your burn rate, and now you've got your savings. So let's just talk about the savings machine. So this is the academics behind this whole philosophy and principle, which is your investment portfolio. You can draw down 4% of it on an annualized basis, and you're going to either stay like where it's at or grow. And this is just like kind of this academic study. They backdated across multiple centuries of stock market data. And this would be 4% in your retirement. So if you were to stop making income and just pull from your portfolio, every year 4%, and then each successive year you could pull 4% plus inflation. And that's just kind of the rule of thumb. And you believe in this, and this is where this stuff is based. This is some data analysis whereby they back tested this from 1871 all the way to 1989. And this like kind of proves out this Trinity study of the 4% rule. So what I'll call out is there's a couple assumptions here that are like pretty much fact. But basically one of the things is the market returns 7% annually on an average basis. It's 6.7, but it's something that you could trust in. But again, you're going to have years with 40, 35% returns and years with negative 20, but as you can see in the bottom frequency, they're around like 0 to 20%, right around there. So it averages to 7. Additionally, what this like crazy graph is showing you is it's basically the person had 1.5 million in the bank. They took 60K spending. They had an 80-20 portfolio, which we'll talk about what that means. And they retired for 30 years. And what it did was if they retired in, let's say, 1941 to 1971, they figured out how much money they would have. And they ran all these simulations. And if you see here, it's a 96.6% success ratio. That means 96.6% of the time, they ended with 0 or positive. So they were able to get through their whole life with 1.5 million, with drawing down 60K. Now, if you look at the median right here, they end with 2.5. The 90th percentile, they ended with $6.5 million. So if you picked the right year to retire, you crushed. Now, the 10th percentile is like 750K. So now going back to like the Degens guide, like you all know I love gambling or whatever. Dude, if you tell me a 96.6% success rate, like that's 100% in my mind. 90% chance that I'm going to end with 750K. Sign me up, baby. Like this is basically automatic to me. And while I was saying like you could withdraw 4% and basically stay equal or gain, that's pretty much the 25th percentile. So I use shortcuts to describe what this is because that's the easiest way, but that's really the math behind this. And then the right side here shows what your actual withdrawal rate could have been. So if you looked at 1920, that was the boom. Like that was when the person would have ended up with 6.5 mil. They could have withdrawn 10% of their portfolio, so lived off 150K a year for 30 years and still been successful and not ran out of money. So I'm going to pause here. This is the first like really weird academic thing and it could be confusing. So I just want to ask any questions that folks may have about this.
Hey, Chris, Sean here.
Yeah.
Hey, so I see the retire age as 40. I feel like a lot of investments you will be penalized for starting to withdraw. Is you going to educate us a bit on that?
Heck yeah, Sean, great question. So yes, that is correct. Most of your retirement counts you can't touch until 59 and a half. There are some creative ways to get to it earlier, but also the way in which we set up the machine is taking that into account. So you may end up having both a tax advantaged account, all your 401ks and stuff, but half of your portfolio may be in a taxable account, which is just like a regular brokerage account. So you end up drawing down from your regular brokerage account until you can access your 401k stuff. So you don't actually pay the penalty, but you do need to think about that depending on what your actual goals are. So you don't save all your money in a place that's illiquid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. Other questions?
This definitely factors into account like natural inflation and things like that, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, right in here, it factors in the inflation element in this. Cool.
So Chris, the 4%, you're saying that you're basically utilizing 4% of whatever your savings is, but then the remaining 94% is continuing to gain in whatever you're continuing to keep in there, right?
Yep. And now TJ, like the very rough math is like if the market returns 7% and you're withdrawing 4%, like you're netting positive. Now that is like a very reductionist way to like describe it because obviously there's taxes and there's like ups and downs and whatever. But this is like kind of the principle and philosophy that we use in creating our strategy, as well as with an early retirement, like doing it way early. You do have some risk here that like something crazy happens and like Trump gets reelected in like 2032 or something when he's 85 and runs the country into the ground, right? So if the market goes crazy and I had retired early, look, I can go back to work, right? So that's like kind of the element here is it's, yes, you're trying to get to financial independence way earlier, like retire by 40 or even earlier or like 55 or whatever you want. But that's not like you have to stay on that. It's just more of like creating the option and ability, and then you just get agile as things change.
Gotcha.
Yeah, cool.
And you also mentioned taking into consideration inflation. So like, let's say inflation is 3%. So would you be increasing the amount you pull out by like 4.3% then?
Yeah, so this basically here, you start at like, this started at 60K. So it would pull 60K in the first year. And then in the second year, it'll probably whole like 60,000, 560 or whatever. And then the next year it'd be like 60,
Gotcha.
61.5, and then 62.
Okay.
I'm doing really trash math.
No, I get what you're saying though. Okay.
Mhm. Yep. Cool. So here's the 4% rule applied to the like planning sheet that I have of Andy Dwyer. Andy Dwyer makes 100K annually. Pretty good for a guy who eats paint. This assumes he makes a 3% salary increase year over year. So he works for a pretty good company that guarantees some cost of living adjustment. He has zero savings. So he started with nothing saved in the bank, zero debt, but he also has no major liquid purchases that he's going to do. He's going to rent forever. So he's just going to plow towards this retirement age. This is inside of that sheet as an example. And you can see it, but anything in yellow is where you would end up putting your own numbers in to go figure it out. But looking at him, let's take a gander. Hold on one sec. I saw a chat, so I just want to make sure I can see it. I'll go. Yeah, more puppy. Cool. So let's just apply this to Andy. He's got 100K. He starts now at 32. At his current burn rate of around, I think it was like 41K, he'll be financially independent when he's 46. So what, it took him 14 years to get to a place where he is on autopilot. It's not that long, right? It's pretty easy. And I mean, he's there, and in 14 years, he could go do that work. Now, if he wants to live off 60K, like that's his target independence burn rate, it's only 3 more years of work. And he's at the 1.5 and he's there. So what I like to call out is the fact that the time it takes you to get to like your first 500K is relative to how long it takes you to get to your next million is like pretty much the same amount of time. So that shows you the power of compounding interest and starting early, because if you have a good base, it's going to grow way faster. So that's why I like always advocate for people to just try to learn this early. And that's why I'm like trying to push it on my friends, like who's willing to like hear and listen. Because like luckily Chelsea and I like found this early. We've been doing this since we're like in our early 20s. So it's just like we got a head start and it's been very helpful. So this is where I call out, and then we can go through the sheet, but it's really fun. And then he's like, hey, I've been doing this since 49. I'm independent. Why don't I like work 4 more years, because now my kid is already getting into drugs and I might need to go get rehab for him. So I'll need to live off 100K annually instead of 60. So let me work 3 more years. And this recording is gonna be funny because that's gonna be my example from now on. So thanks, CJ, for making this spicy. But yeah, this is where you can start to scenario plan, and it's fun to daydream and work through. But this is where we'll spreadsheet, and again, we can go work through it. Questions, hopefully inspirational. You guys aren't that far. Let's do this. And then we can all hang out and be happy. Cool. This last part of the kind of lens on life thing summarizes the 4 key areas that I think you need to think about and establish to help you guide your like financial decisions moving forward, but also understand what your strategy is going to be. So first and foremost, thinking about your length of service, which to me is basically like how fast do you want to go to fuck you status, and like how okay are you, and like basically that tells you how aggressive you need to be. Your burn rate, what's your current burn rate that you want to go live off of? That was what we started with and talked about. Your lifestyle, when you want to hit that independence, do you want to live off 60K or whatever? Because that's something you need to like plan against. Your liquid requirements, which is, do you need to buy a house? Do you have a wedding coming through? Do you need to save for some stuff? Because that does materially impact how you save, as well as your timing of those things. And then lastly, your risk tolerance. This is both a risk tolerance with your portfolio in and of itself, of like how much risk are you willing to take on with aggressiveness of being in market and like the investments you choose. But it's also your risk tolerance for the other 3 things. If I'm like, I must buy a house in 5 years, that means you need to be a bit more risk averse with how you get there, because you're inflexible about when you get to it. But if you told me like, I want to shoot for 5, but I'm okay if it's at 8, I'm going to tell you to do certain things with that savings cash that puts it at risk of like going down, but also puts it at like an opportunity to grow way faster. So that's what I mean by risk tolerance of that. Additionally, with your FIRE independence number, if you're like, yeah, I want to retire by I'm 40, but I'm also okay retiring by 45, then you can also do some things, take some riskier shots or whatever, because you know you're okay working longer. So those are the things to think and consider. Cool. Questions? Otherwise, next section. Cool. All making sense, feeling good. Great. See some head nods. We'll move on to the next one. Jimmy, what's up?
Yeah, man. Let's say I want to start a business. What would that be classified as a liquid?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yes. Now, and that would be something like to know that you want to. Also, so I'll use us as an example, like taking the risk from going from a corporate job to like starting our own business. Like I was luckily at a place where my taxable brokerage account had enough liquid cash that it was in market, but it would be okay if I like didn't make some income over a period of time and I could draw from it. So I guess that was like a weird background way of saying like, if you do want to start a business, that's great. And it just depends on how immediate you know you need cash for it. Otherwise, just build a portfolio that has a bunch of accessible funds. If you think like in 5, 6, 7 years, you might want to go tap into that to go start the business. Because if you go back to here, this left column, non-brokerage holdings, if Andy just started saving and working through it, and he's like, hey, maybe in 5 years, I want to start a business. At 37, he's going to have 60K pretty much in the market that he could touch immediately. So he could just go grab it. So he may not have been deliberately saving for it and put that money at risk, but he just knows he'll build a portfolio that he has that flexibility. So does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, cool,
Thanks,
cool.
man.
Yeah. So let's talk about the accumulation phase now. This is, hey, you figured out your burn rate, you know your income, you know what your saving base is. Now, how do you allocate that savings to meet the goals that you've tried to establish? So there's a link down in the bottom right, and most of these slides have links to sources. This is a really great flow chart, albeit pretty robust, of like, how should I like allocate my savings? So first and foremost, boom, it says create a budget. The next flow part is pay all your immediate bills, like your rent, mortgage, like survive, and then build a small emergency fund if you don't have one, $1,000 or 1 month's rent or whatever, and then pay some of your non-essential bills as well, like cable, internet. But really, like you should be taking care of this slide, and I know most of you are all at that place, so I won't spend that much time. I think the most interesting thing after this is instead of attacking other debt, it says, does your employer offer a 401k match? Now it's like, that's weird. Why does it say pay your essential bills and then go straight into a 401k match? Well, really one of the big philosophies with this stuff is never leave free money on the table. And in essence, your 401k is free money that your company wants to give you. This is also inclusive of like employee stock purchase plans and whatnot. But basically they're saying, hey, if you put X away, we'll give you 4% or whatever. So for Andy, I use the example of his company says, if you save 6%, we'll match 100% of the first 2 and 50% of the last 4. So we'll give you $4,000 for free. So do not pass this up, Andy. I don't care how much other things you want to go buy or whatever, go get that free money. If anyone has an employee stock purchase plan or stuff like that, I can go over it. But basically this is go get your free money. Questions? Cool. Now the next piece is debt. So from there it says, do you have any high interest debt? And this is kind of where also risk tolerance comes into play. So I'll just hum a few bars about my opinion of this stuff. So if you have high interest debt, anything over 7%, pay that sucker. Like go pay it down and just get rid of that stuff. Now, if it's less than 7%, theoretically, you may not want to as aggressively pay that thing down because as I was describing, the market returns 7% year over year. So a lot of folks right now, mortgage interest rates are super low, like what, 2.5%, 3%. So some people are of the philosophy, let that thing ride and don't aggressively pay down your mortgage. Instead, arbitrage that and put the rest in the market and make money off of it. And don't do that. Now, there 100% is a ton of good psychological value of having zero debt. And I am all about that stuff. Additionally, if you followed that guidance of don't pay your mortgage down aggressively because you could make more in the market, it requires so many things. It requires you to be like responsible enough to take that excess and put it into the market. It requires you to also just like, to basically do that. And that's like requires a lot of effort, as well as it does put that money at risk as well. So this is something where you find your own choice in this, but I just wanted to call it out because then you'll hear people say like, oh, that's stupid or whatever. Look, I aggressively pay our mortgage down because I like don't want to. And I'm the guy who's telling you like, oh, go invest in all this stuff, but it is a balance. So this is something for you to think about.
Yeah, and Chris, one of the things, luckily, just having been your friend for a while and now having been in business with you, basically just whatever Chris tells me to do, I do, which is really helpful from that perspective. But one of the things that like we've been, kicking around is like, because of you, we did the 15-year refinance on our house, but the interest rates are so low. But I've also been overpaying it, and I'm like, kind of don't want to go through the hassle of refinancing and thinking of having 15 years of mortgage, even though it would be, a lower interest. How do you calculate that part of sort of like value of headache, of sort of having to go through that, and then the mental gymnastics sort of behind that part?
Yeah, so the value of headache is your own choice. So you have to weigh your own, like, what's the value of sleeping well at night and knowing you don't have any debt versus knowing you're balancing and like, I just loan this money out and I like can go make it into more. So that's something you need to calculate on your own. The other element with a mortgage refinance is the cost of mortgage refinance. Like there's fees and stuff, and you factor that in. And then the differential between your two interest rates. So let's say your interest rate right now for illustrative purposes is 5%, and you could refinance to 2.5%. That might be a slam dunk refi for you, just because like the difference is so high and you can just amortize that across and see what the savings would be. And then the one other element of it that I learned after I went through that portion is the longer the loan, the lower your interest rate would be. But you can also still aggressively pay your loan as if you had a 20-year loan, and it kind of ends up being the same thing, but it gives you some flexibility should you lose income, that your only payment obligation is a lot lower than what it would be at a 15-year versus 30. So for example, a 30-year might be a $2,000 mortgage, where a 15-year might be a $1,400 mortgage, but every payment you could still make $2K and you're still paying it down at the same rate. But if you were to like lose your job, you only owe $1,400 on a monthly basis. So you have a little bit of flexibility. So coming back to your question of how do you evaluate the value of that choice? The only financial element is interest rate minus interest rate and what you're paying. And then everything else is your own choice of headache and risk and stuff like that. Cool. Anyone else?
Hey, Chris, I had a question.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of answered it, but so my student loans, I refinanced it to 3.75%. I have about 80K, right? But I was just thinking, man, instead of paying down all my loans as fast as possible, I should invest in a brokerage account because it looks like the return this past year was like 18%. So, but it sounds like what you're saying is I should maybe find a balance between those two. Not pay like you would recommend not paying my loans as fast as possible, but putting some of that money into a brokerage account. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, again, that's a riskier move, right? And then it also requires you to like be diligent about that stuff. And the risk element is like market tanks, and then you could have paid off your loan, but now you don't have that money. Now you go work for that money. And you just balance where your tolerance is. But yes, theoretically, that would be a very smart money move to do.
But would you recommend investing in mutual funds over like an individual stock? Because my friend told me like individual stocks like Tesla could potentially make more money than a mutual fund if the market is good.
Dude, very great question. That will be in the stocks portion, and you'll hear my philosophy on that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. All right. So the next part of the savings machine is talking about having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months living expenses, and that's where you start to flow and put. So what I consider an emergency fund is highly liquid funds that you can go access for things that come up, like hospital bill, fire damage, and stuff like that. So you want to build a base to go cover those things. Now, where you store it, that's a function, again, of risk tolerance and personal choice. So you could be the degenerate that I'll call myself and the Sandman philosophy. The way that we did it when we were building our first emergency fund is I did want 3 months liquid in a savings account just so that I knew that it was there. And then after that, building towards the 6, every excess I was starting to put into the market. I wasn't keeping 6 months fully in a checking account. I was starting to go try to make money off that money. And then now that our brokerage account is a good base, I don't even keep 3 months of rent in a savings account. I only keep 10K just for like convenience sake. It's just like, oh, I could pay people pretty quickly so that I don't have to go sell some stock and then go withdraw it. But that's like our own personal choice. And this is a highly aggressive strategy. Like if you talk to a financial advisor, they may say like, dude, that's Degen. You should keep instead your savings, your emergency fund in a low cost savings account that gives you 1% return, but has zero risk of going down unless you spend it. Now, this is again, your own personal choice. Andy Dwyer, I just said he'll keep 3 months in a checking account because he has peace of mind and he eats pain. So maybe he shouldn't be so aggressive about his money. Questions about that stuff, emergency fund? Cool. So from here, we're going to talk about the investment accounts because in the flow chart, it now starts to move into those things. And there are 2 different types of investment accounts. There's tax advantaged and taxable. Now, before I get into that, I do want to play a video so that we're all aligned on a particular topic that is actually pretty confusing. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video for us. Let me make sure. Okay, I got my sound. Here we go.
These are tax brackets for 2019. Simple, right? But many of us make a common mistake when looking at this. Let's say my income is $84,000. You might think that puts me in the 3rd bracket, so I would owe the federal government 22% of my income. This is wrong, and it's causing us to have uninformed debates about tax policy. Here's how it actually works. Let's go back to my $84,000 income. Now, instead of thinking of tax rates as brackets, we should think of them as pockets. But first, there's one special pocket we need to talk about. The money we put in this pocket is not taxed. The government automatically lets single people put $12,000 in this special pocket, and more for couples. But if you spend a lot of money on things like medical expenses or charitable donations, you can sometimes put in more. These are called deductions. With the $70,000 that's left over, we can start filling up the pockets. The first pocket only has room for $9,700, so I only pay 10% on this money. Then I pay 12% on the money in the next pocket. And then 22% on the money in this pocket. These are called marginal tax rates, and that's how these brackets actually work. So if I get a raise, that new money goes into the first pocket with empty space. When space runs out, we put it in the next pocket. So the raise, and only the raise, would be partially taxed at 22% and partially at 24%. So when politicians say they want to raise the top tax rate, it doesn't necessarily mean these pockets and your money are affected. They're talking about tax rates on the pockets way over there, which are only used once people have filled in these smaller ones. Marginal tax rates are a pretty simple concept once you get the hang of it. So the next time a politician says the government wants to take away 70% of your income, just send them this video. These are tax.
All right. Raise of hand, honesty. Who knew that that's how our taxes worked?
Only
Okay.
because you showed me this video a long time ago. So that's my cheating.
Excellent. I actually have to watch this every year just to remind myself because it's pretty confusing, like I think. But the pocket analogy is like pretty helpful in thinking about this stuff. And it's really helpful to think about like when you want to understand the difference between tax advantage and taxable investment accounts. So your tax advantage accounts are your IRAs, your 401ks, 403bs, HSAs, 457s, all those like fancy languages. But basically what it does is it allows you to take money out of your furthest pocket and put it in the deduction pocket. So your 401k lets you take 19.5 out of your 22%, your 24% and put it in the 0%. And by doing that, you now have more money to put in the market and make more money out of. So that's a really sweet ass deal. But the reason why they let you do that is it's highly illiquid. You can't touch it until you're 59 and a half. You get 10% early withdrawal fees if you make that choice incorrectly, albeit there are some like small provisions for that stuff. There are annual limits, so you can't go ham. So it's like, oh, I just want to put $90,000 inside of this tax advantage account. Now I have zero taxable income. My pockets are empty. Yay. Like they don't let you do that. And then there are two different types, tax deferred and tax exempt, which we'll go more deeply over. And then the other one is taxable accounts. And this is a brokerage account, which is highly liquid. It's basically like a savings or a checking account type liquid. It allows you to invest into the market. You're already using tax funds that you already taxed on. And then all that happens is you pay capital gains taxes on any of your gains. There's short-term capital gains, which basically get taxed in those pockets. So let's say you were selling a bunch of different stocks and you made $50,000, 50K would go into those end pockets and you would be charged 22%, 24% or whatever. And then long-term capital gains, if you held an asset for more than a year, and this could even be a house or like, I don't know, any stock or whatever, they have these long-term capital gains brackets that instead of 22, 24, you either charge 15%, 20%, or even 0%, depending on where your overall adjusted gross income for the year is. Is that making sense, the difference? Any questions here? Because this can get confusing.
Yeah, so Chris, the Andy Dwyer analogy, the 84. So if Andy's making 100 grand and he puts in $17,000 into his 401k and his company matches like a point or whatever, and then he's got like 19 grand in his 401k, that'll bring him down to that 84,000, right? So he'll be in that lower bucket, despite the fact that sort of on paper, he makes 100 grand, but really he only made 84 grand that the IRS wants to tax him on, right?
That's a good way of thinking about it. And then I like to reinforce that it's a pocket. So if he made another grand, that it just goes into like that other next tranche, but it doesn't move all that other money into like a higher one. So yeah, as well as a note, your 401k match does not count to your 19.5 limit. So you personally can put 19.5 and then the like 4% he gets, the 4,000 doesn't count. So he could actually put 23,500 in his 401k on an annual basis.
Yeah, and this session's recording, so I won't talk about my employer's match right now.
No, it's a recruiting tool, Derek. Love your life, slalom.
And Chris, and maybe this is where you're getting to, already said this piece, is the idea that let's say you want to retire at 50, you would have no income. So you would pull from your 401k, knowing that 10% and then pay the taxes based on the limit that you need.
I wouldn't do that, but there is a way in which we can access it through what's like a Roth conversion ladder, and it gets a little complicated. What you would do in the years before 59 and a half is hopefully you balanced it. So your brokerage account, this taxable account, that's where you're pulling from. So really all you're going to be paying is your capital gains tax as your income tax.
And then one of the other things too, and maybe you have this part, but when you buy your first house, I don't know if this still exists, but you can actually pull from your 401k for your down payment if it's your first house without the penalties. So
Yes.
we learned that when we bought our house, and you might cover that part, but yeah.
No, I don't cover some of those like more nuanced provisions, but it is something to take into account. What I will say is I have opinions about that, mostly from the fact that anything I put in a tax advantage account, I advocate never touching, because even if you pull from it, you can't put it back. And this is a really sweet ass deal over on the left side. So I try to like leave the money in as much as I can so it can continue to grow in an advantaged way. So really what you want is a really sweet balance in there. And that's how you can even accelerate getting to your retirement earlier by getting this free money. Because in essence, the left side is that free money on the table, but you do balance grabbing it all unless, depending on how much liquidity you need. Yeah.
Chris, one of the things that you had on that flow chart was you only want to put in as much as your company is going to match, right?
You only want to do that if you don't have your 3 to 6 months emergency fund. And then right after that 3 to 6 months, it talks about debt. And then you pay off your high interest debt, and then max your 401k is usually the next place. So it's just kind of like, you want to make sure you don't leave that match on the table, even if you still need to build your emergency fund, because the free money is too free. Okay, gotcha. Cool. So now let's move into, and this really advocates why tax advantage is great. If this person was investing 100,000 over 30 years at 8%, the tax advantage account makes 360K more than if you were to be taxed on it. So I'll go into another example of this. Insofar that, like, here's Andy Dwyer. He makes his 100K, and he can either at the top max his 401k as well as his health savings account. If he does, he'll end up with $55,000 as gross income post-tax, and then he has his burn rate. So I think it was like 40K. So he'd end up having $15,000 left over to play with, invest, and whatnot. That's liquid. Now, if he's like, I want all of it liquid, he would then not invest in these tax advantaged accounts, and he ends up with $70,867. So in essence, he could either take $23,050 invested now, or take $15,800 in liquid cash, which is a $7,000 differential. So this is $7,000 free dollars to be invested, with the trade-off of it becoming illiquid. 68 cents on every dollar. Now you see how I'm really advocating to take advantage of this stuff, because this is free money, right? We already talked about the free 4K and 401k match. I just told you guys how to achieve $11,000 of free money that's just sitting on the table right now. So letting it sink in. Obviously there's things to consider, but this is what the machine is built on, is trying to grab all this stuff. Cool. All right, see some head nods. Let's keep on keeping on. So the next piece about this is talking about these tax advantage accounts, and it's the traditional versus Roth debate. And at the beginning of this, I was talking about, hey, there are some like philosophies that really are legitimate on both sides. And this is really kind of the Coke and Pepsi, the Jordan or LeBron, the Jen or Angelina. Depends on what side you're on. I'm personally on the traditional side and not on the Roth. I will contradict myself, but basically traditional all the way until you have a ton of good like excess savings, and then you take advantage of the Roth. And there are a variety of reasons why. And what traditional is, back when I was talking about the tax advantaged accounts, that there being two types, tax deferred and tax exempt. Tax deferred is pre-tax. So you get to take it out of those furthest pockets and not get taxed on it. So you have more money. That last example, when I said there was like 6K on the table for free, that would be in the assumption of it's pre-taxed. Now, you get that money early, so you have more money in the bank to compound to create more money. And when you actually access it, you will get taxed on it. Now, it will get taxed at hopefully a lower income tax rate than what you're at right now, because theoretically you're not making as much income. So your pocket, you never reach the 24% pocket. Instead, you're staying in the 18% pocket. So you just made some savings there. Now, that would be the reason why you go tax deferred. For me, I really think that I'd rather have more money now to make it into more money than think about the rates later. Now, the tax exempt, you pay tax now, but it goes into an account and it grows and you never pay taxes ever again. So this is really good if you're really early in your 20s. And what I would say why it's good is you're probably going to be in the lowest income tax bracket, unless you're like an awesome person and you make a ton of money out of college or whatever. Also, like you might be living at home, so you have a ton of excess savings, and like you could pay it now and then just pump it into your Roth. In the bottom right corner, there's some sources, and it's the debate back and forth. There are other legitimate reasons for Roth. Basically, you can early withdraw your principal that you've put in, so long as it's been there for 5 years. So it's a little bit more liquid than your traditional account. And then there's a little bit more nuance, but for the sake of time, I'll just go leave it at that. But that is my perspective on that stuff. Now, lastly, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the ways that it was explained to me pretty early on, and it was probably explained to me incorrectly, or I did not understand it, was that like taxes will never go down. In how do you look at like how taxes have gone up, and sort of whether they're talking about even Medicare for all, like that just means our taxes are going to go up, et cetera. How do you think about like, okay, pay the tax on it now because it's going to be significantly more later on?
That's a great question, Casey. So basically there is a balance, and that is totally true. If you believe that our tax rate is going to hit like 50% from the 22%, because like we're going to be a socialist area, the Roth is a good hedge. Like you're hedging against that reality happening. I am of the opinion that I don't want to plan for a reality that may happen, but instead plan for right now. The counterbalance to that is because you're making so much, like you get more money now, it gets to grow faster. So you get that extra 6K immediately to compound over 20 years now. That I think outweighs the potential that our income tax rates will go up. As well as I believe that when I'm accessing this money, I'm going to be only filling up the first 2 pockets, whereas right now I'm filling up the first 4 pockets. So that's something to consider as well, right? So if you are going to be in the lower 2 pockets, then you actually, even if income tax rates go higher, you might still be paying less income tax later than you would if you were to tax it now. So it is, again, a function of how much are you making now to decide if Roth is beneficial, and you can nerd out to try to optimize that stuff. Does that make sense? It can be a pretty heady topic. Anyone else have questions?
Yeah,
Chris? Oh, wait, here, let's go Chris Stryker, and then Jimmy, and then Kevin.
Got it.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask, so you're saying to put it into, I mean, you're put it into the traditional, you make more money, but when you pull it out, you're being taxed on that more money. So aren't you being taxed more than if you were?
Yeah, that's the way in which I'll say it is, yes, you're going to pay more net taxes, like on a dollar figure, but you're paying tax on money you otherwise wouldn't have. Do you know what I mean? So like if you have extra money, like yes, you're going to pay more in taxes, but you also have more money. So it kind of counterbalances.
Right.
So that's like
Kind of been
it's
my
hard to like
understanding.
immediately grasp, but that's usually the thing that I try to break people's mindset around.
Right. You have more money, but you're being taxed more on it. So yeah, kind of what you said, the counter stance.
Yeah, because you otherwise wouldn't have that cash. So it's still
Right.
better to get 80% of extra money than 0% of zero money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, totally. Jimmy?
I don't know if this was the same question, but so what you're saying is with traditional, because you're not getting taxed till later, you have a bigger principal,
Yes.
technically? Okay. So that was my first question. My second question is, I don't know where I got this advice, but I think I got it flipped around, or maybe I didn't. I think I did actually, where I've been investing in a traditional IRA, 401k up until now with every single company I've worked with. Recently, I've switched it to Roth IRA. But what you're saying is I should have done it the reverse. I should have done Roth IRA when I was younger, and then now I should be switching. So this past year, I've been investing in, I've been putting my money in the Roth IRA. So you're saying I should probably be better off switching it back to the traditional?
That's my philosophy around it. Now it depends on where you're sitting, Jimmy, and which pocket are you in? Are you in the third one of 24% and you're going to pay that now? Like I'm of the philosophy, yes, bigger principal now equals more money later, and then I'll deal with the pockets later. But yes,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay. Does it benefit then to have like a mix of a traditional and a Roth, or should I then be just converting that? Because I know there's a fee when you convert from one type to another. And I'm just trying.
Yeah, so there's only a fee when you convert from traditional to Roth. Now, if you've already had it in the Roth, you're not going to convert it back to traditional. It's just already there. And just think like, okay, I'll do that for the next time or whatever. So I actually have a Roth 401k balance from when I was younger. And then I also have like a way bigger traditional bucket. And then I call out the difference between a 401k and an IRA because an IRA is a separate account from your 401k that you can also put, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next successive slides. But I think you're talking about a Roth 401k.
A Roth 401k. And what's the difference between a Roth 401k and a Roth IRA?
So a 401k is provided through work, and an IRA account is a supplementary account that is personal. So you would just open up a brokerage account and then you would save on your own in addition to the retirement plan that you have access to. So we'll talk about that in the next couple slides.
Got it.
Cool. Kevin?
So the Roth element is talking about that post-tax.
Yeah, the Roth is talking about the first tax deferred or tax exempt. And then it can be applied to all of those retirement type accounts.
Got it.
Kevin?
Yeah, I think I asked you for my company's 401k. You suggested I do the traditional for the reasons you talked about, but I don't think I told you as a traveler, I get a lot of my money in stipends. So it looks like I'm only making like 16 bucks an hour. And I'm probably going to be in that really low tax bracket for as long as I'm a traveler. So would you recommend that I change my 401k to a Roth because of that?
It again depends on your own personal philosophy and whatnot. The fact that you're making 16 an hour isn't so much the number to focus on, it's your final adjusted gross income, because that's what determines like how much actual money you make. So it's not how the rate in which you make money, it's like how much money do you end with at the year, and then you can figure out how many pockets you're filling. If you're only filling the first or set like one or two pockets, maybe it is a good choice. But that is again like your own decision. But though you balance the reasons that I was describing.
If I had like a side business that made money too, that would factor into my total gross income.
Yes, everything you make, even with the side business and your regular like job income, is all pooled together. So you don't get to treat them separately. So yeah, something for you to think about. Casey, what do you mean by you paying withdrawing?
So Arizona's a bit like the Wild West in a lot of different ways, but our income tax is lower as a whole. So versus like California or something along those lines. So are you also taxed at a state level?
You are.
For that? And so if you suspect then California is going up, or looking at even the last 50 years of the way that it's moved, and probably even your county as a whole as well, should you be taking that into account as well?
Definitely. Yeah. Now it's state income tax brackets are around like 2% to 8%, like that. I mean, I'm calling out California, maybe yours is like way better. But yeah, like theoretically, if I was living in Washington and I knew I was going to move to California in 5 years, maybe it would tilt the scales over to the Roth. But you got to do some like nerd out math to figure it out. But I kind of subscribe still to like more principle now is going to outweigh all of that tax stuff, and I'll figure it out later. But again, this is the Coke and Pepsi thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Jake?
Yeah, Chris, so I've had a Roth IRA since my mid 20s, and I just now started, I'm a new company. I have a 401k. What was your approach or mental model of like, once you had your 401k through work, did you continue to contribute to your Roth IRA, or did you funnel it all into the traditional 401k?
Yeah, great question, Jake. So I'll go over like what I believe is the most optimal savings allocation, but actually we've never done a Roth until a few years ago. We neglected the whole Roth element, like an IRA, excuse me.
Gotcha.
Like we never did that because we had the 401ks and we optimized that. And then before going into the IRA route, I needed to build up our taxable brokerage account. So not all my money was just locked up in accounts I could only touch at 59 and a half. We need a balance. So instead of putting it into another retirement account, instead I put it in a more liquid account because we needed to build up that base so that, yeah, it was more accessible.
Gotcha.
Chris, I think you had a question perhaps.
No, I think if you're talking to me,
yeah.
I was going to ask you something, and I think it's going to be the same answer. It's just going to be personal choice.
Yeah. Okay. And then I mean, I'll for sure, if on a one-on-one basis, you want to nerd out, and I can help figure out where the math sits.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be cool. Thanks.
Thomas, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah. So I have a Roth IRA right now.
Oh yeah, dude. Good for you.
Money into that, or should I have that and then also like taxable like brokerage accounts too?
Well, it depends on your goals. What I will say is if you plow money into a retirement account, assume that you basically spent that money is the advice I give. So you're not going to go access that. You're going to let it grow. Never go touch that thing, because touching it will defeat the purpose and you lose out on so much benefits. If you go to a taxable brokerage account, you can touch it as much as you want. So weird kind of analogy, but or like verbiage, but basically, yes. So that's your choice is, hey, am I going to go spend this money now on future Thomas, or do I want the flexibility that near term Thomas may want to go buy a house or have a wedding or something? That's what you balance. So like I'd want you to, that would be the choice you make, whether to give you to the answer of whether you should do the Roth or the taxable. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So the one thing that I didn't talk about is this HSA account right in the middle. And this is my favorite of all of the retirement accounts for reasons of like, it is both tax deferred insofar that you don't pay, it gets taken out of the furthest pocket and put into the deductions pocket, so you don't pay tax on it. And that, so no tax going in, it can grow tax-free. And when you take it out, it could be tax-free as well, so long as you use it on qualified medical expenses. So you end up with the double dip. Now this has a big asterisk insofar that like that your personal health insurance needs are met through a high deductible health plan. And this is probably only so much if you don't have pre-existing conditions, you don't have prescriptions, maybe, or you don't have like a larger family or something like that. But if a high deductible health plan does work for you, you have access to an HSA, and sometimes even your company gives you free money into the HSA to go in there. And you can go max this thing. And the sweet part about this HSA is a couple things. So not only you get your free money, that money you can invest that balance year over year and it can grow tax-free. And then post 65, you can go access it without penalty. And then if it's ever used for qualified medical expenses, you could use it. The big arbitrage in this is that the way Chelsea and I use it is we've been maxing our HSAs year over year, and it's been growing kind of like a Roth IRA or an IRA account. And for all of our medical expenses, I actually still pay out of pocket. So I pay money, I take a picture of our receipts, and we log the medical expense. So we have like 8 years of medical expenses in an Excel spreadsheet. And the way it works and the law is written, if I ever do need to go access that, I can call on all of those past medical expenses. So imagine I plowed 20K into this over the past 10 years. Compounding interest in great markets have turned it into 75K. Now I have 75K continuing to grow in this tax advantage account. If I do need it, and I've amassed 10K in like medical expenses over the past few years, I can just go take that 10K out, tax-free, penalty-free, and go use it. Now, that goes against that advice that I talked about, which is never touch your retirement accounts. And this, in essence, to me, is another retirement account. So we would never do that. Hopefully aren't in the position to do that. But this is another way in which you can grab some free money and really optimize some of these tax advantage things. Cool.
Chris, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm currently on a high deductible plan where I get $500 a year into this account for free. If I want this money to grow, do I have to do anything, or it's automatically growing?
You have to go do something, Jimmy. If you look
Okay.
at your HSA account, there is an investment option. Sometimes they require you to have a balance. So if you had 500, they might say you need to keep 200 in here and you can invest the other 3. But you do have to take some action, make some allocations, and it's treated just like a 401k. So go log in and go put that money to work. You can also put additional money in there to try to max it out. I think it's like $3,500. And I do believe your employer contribution counts towards it. So unlike your 401k match, you need to, you could only do where it doesn't count against your 19.5, your employer 500 counts against your 3,500.
Got it. Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, totally. Great. So these go over all the tax advantage accounts, and we've got about 40 minutes left. So I think I am flowing pretty good timing. But now let's just talk about savings allocation. We've talked about all the different accounts that you could have, but basically Andy Dwyer, as our example, he had $100,000 and now he needs to decide, do I max my 401k? He knows that his annual burn rate's $40,000, so he had 60K to play with. How should he prioritize his allocation? Now, first, we talked about that flow chart, do your 401k match. So boom, of that 40K that he had, he's gonna put 6K in here for sure. The next option, I say HSA max. Like the HSA is an awesome account, you should go do this. So go do that. Now the next flow is maxing the rest of his 401k. So that's 13.5. So $23,050, go get that free money and go use those tax advantage. Now, again, this is him not having any near-term liquidity needs, which we'll go over when that comes through. And then from there, he could consider his IRA or his brokerage account, combination of the sets of 2. So this is kind of the flow of where you should be allocating your excess savings funds. Now let's talk quickly about the IRA account, which we talked about, which is an elective account that's personal. There are income limits of what you can contribute for traditional IRAs, which I've said like I love traditional. If you have a 401k or a retirement plan at work, they really constrain your ability to go contribute to these things. So you have to make 65K or less to get the tax deduction. Basically what this means is if you want to get a traditional IRA in addition to your 401k, that $6,000 you apply in there, the only way that it moves out of the furthest pocket is if you make 65,000 or less. Now that's a really tight, narrow window. So most people don't qualify for this traditional IRA if they also have a retirement plan at work. So Andy's not going to go do this. Now for Roth IRAs, there is a way higher income limit. So if he makes less than 124K, he could theoretically go use his Roth IRA. So he maxes his 401k and maybe he maxes his Roth and boom, he's crushing. Now, if you make over 139K, you are sad panda and you don't have access to it. But hey, lucky for you, there is a very intricate loophole called a backdoor Roth IRA. Chelsea and I do this because our adjusted gross income is over and we have excess savings that it makes sense. I have this slide. I'm not going to go over it for time's sake because it's a pretty niche thing, but I have it there to access if this applies to your situation. So I would say go take a look at it. But there is it's not really a loophole, but it feels like a loophole. But basically there's a way in which you can still contribute to a Roth IRA if you're over the income limits. So moving on, Andy Dwyer, he's our example, right? He had his 100K turned into 60 after his burn rate. He's going to do 23.5 in all of these accounts. He now, as a fourth one, is going to take 10,320 and put it into an emergency fund. And then he's got 3,463 to go play with and start his taxable brokerage account. That would be his allocation. This is my advice to him. But Andy in our one-on-one session says, hey, I think I actually want to buy a house too. I go, okay, well, let's see what you should be doing. Should you not max your 401k if you want to go do that or whatever? Well, the first step is let's go to the compounding interest calculator and figure out what do I need to save in order to hit that savings goal. There's a link to the calculator here, but if I know I need 100K for a down payment, it makes you put an initial investment, but let's say it's $100. And he says 5-year target. We're saying that that the market's going to return 7% year over year. So we'll use that. So how much money does he need to save on an annual basis to get to 100K? Well, calculator says $17,364 annually. Now, that would be to reach his goal. So if he now retools the furthest thing, he wants a 100K down payment, he's got a couple things to consider. Does he remove maxing his 401k, but he's leaving free money on the table that allows him to get further? Or does he stretch his target to like 7 years, never leave free money on the table, max his 401k, and then he only needs to save like 12K annually? Because despite him having 10,320 in his emergency fund, he could be a Degen like Chris was and just put it all in the market. I don't know if you've got safety nets, you've got dual income, maybe it is worth it to go do, but this is where you would go into your sheet and really mess with this planning tool. So over here, he's got 19.5, 35.50. If he needs to, and in essence, he has the 13K that we talked about. Let's see what happens if he only puts in 15,000 in his 401k. That means that he would end up with, boom, about $17,000. So he probably really needs to take this down to 10K or something to have enough liquid cash flow. Now that's 20 to be on pace to hit his $100,000 goal within the 5 years set. So if you look down here and he continues to save that much, let me just go really quickly and I'll apply this to the next 5 years. When does he have 100K in his taxable brokerage account? Right here. So he would hit his 5-year mark if he gave up $9,500 in his 401k on an annual basis, and at 22%, that's $1,800 free money year over year. So So this is basically the math that you would do. And if you have individualized goals, again, I'd love to sit down and help you to figure out what your sheet should look like. But that hopefully gives an illustrative sense of how to plan your savings so that you have enough liquidity in one bucket to meet your purchasing goals and whatnot, but also take advantage of all the free money that's on the table. Cool. So that was a lot. I plowed through it, and then we move into like the gross stuff, but this isn't as long and we've got 30 minutes. I'd probably say there's 15 more minutes left. Any questions here? Anything that you guys want to revisit, or we can go into stonks?
So Chris, first of all, this is awesome. Thank you. Second of all, I think I was taught none of this as a kid, right? So I think the only thing that I was ever exposed to was like pensions, wait till you're 60, whatever years old and things like that. Is this just new math where you're taking into account pre-tax and post-tax? Like walk me through, is this new or was this always available and our parents were too dumb to tell us about this? Like how does this work, right?
Dude, it's totally the latter. And I attribute it to the internet. Like probably some gurus in there were in their closet and they figured it out and they did it, but they didn't have a way to share it. And like now with the internet, Reddit and all that, like it catches fire and people start to realize, whoa, there's a lot of simple math here. It does require you like trusting in the market and doing some particular things, but like it's not as crazy. And this kind of debunks a lot of the traditional model of like, yeah, you work till you're 65 and then you live your life or whatever. Like, no, you could do this way earlier. And obviously we're privileged and we all make decent money and stuff like that. But like, this is kind of the simplicity of it. And partially why I made this class and why I want to share it to everyone is like, look, this is a really cool thing. And you guys can get to an independence place. And ideally, like I would teach this to high schoolers is my perspective on it.
Yeah, I mean, like I was an accounting major and all of this, it starts to come back. But it's crazy how, I just haven't thought of it since like college really. And I should have been paying more attention and then actually putting it to use.
Yeah. And luckily I found it earlier. Like I was kind of obsessed with this type of stuff, making like saving and making money and whatnot due to life circumstances. But I feel really grateful that I found a lot of this early and then just got a bit of a head start. So that's why I'm at that place of saying like, yeah, let's go share the wealth. Cool.
Hey, Chris, I love the HSA information. I never knew you could like use it that way. The only thing I'm curious on is like, what's the mindset behind like kind of holding off on spending it? Is it just to kind of make it grow and then you have that for medical expenses when like you're older?
Yeah, Lawrence, that's exactly it. It's trying to get a bigger principal balance in a tax advantaged account so that it can snowball even bigger so that you're not going to be paying taxes on it later. So it's just like you want to keep as big of a balance in these retirement accounts and not touch it so that you get as much value out of the like the reason why they exist, which is those tax advantages. So that also is part of your 401k and stuff like that. And why I always say any money you put in a retirement account, consider it spent. Like instead of buying a Tesla, you bought financial freedom. And that's really nice. Yeah. What I will say about the HSA really quickly while I remember it is do not confuse this with your flexible spending account option, which is an FSA. There's a version of that you can use for childcare. And then a version of that you can use for health expenses, which then gets pretty confusing. The FSA is a use it or lose it account, which is tax advantaged, but it isn't a retirement vehicle or whatever. So like we can talk a little bit more about it, but I just want to put that asterisk because sometimes it'll get confused.
Does the HSA grow? Like, do you get interest on that? So is that tied to you no matter if you change jobs, if you're unemployed? Like that's just a small nest egg that continues to grow because we're all predominantly healthy. Like now we build it up to a point and then we stop investing in it and then it grows naturally when we all start just all dying of cancer kind of thing?
Yeah, great question, Derek. So it does grow. You do need to make investment allocations just like a 401k. And then if you were to leave your job or not, or change health plans where you're not on the high deductible anymore, you still keep that balance. And then it rolls over into either a personal HSA account that you have that you manage, or you can leave it in your employer's version. If you leave the employer, same with a 401k, you want to roll it over to a different account because you're going to pay fees. So if you guys have a bunch of hanging 401ks from different jobs, consolidate those bitches, because right now you're probably paying $100 a year for them to like maintain them.
Does that also lower your Aggie as well? Like donating a bunch of money into the HSA?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Cool. All right. Stonks. Stonks can be a scary thing. And Chelsea and I just watched Wall Street last night, and it was freaking awesome. And it was inspired because I knew I was going to do this class, Gordon Gekko and all that stuff. And there are some principles in this that are requirements in order for you to be successful, and some assumptions, which I'll like kind of call out. But here comes an illustration of one of the first core principles, which is time in market is way better than timing the market. Now, timing the market is buying low and selling high. You're like actively trading and whatnot. What I will say is no one beats the market. No one. And like, there are crazy, crazy AI machines doing it. And unless you're Gordon Gekko and you're insider trading, or you're Bobby Axelrod and blowing up like factories so that it tanks the company, like no one beats the market. And that's just really the reality of it. And if you're trying to, you're gambling. And you just got to know like that is the case. However, putting your money in the market and letting it grow, it will grow. You just have to have faith. So this is the example that you can kind of see about timing the market. This is Bad Luck Brian. He's a good, well-intentioned guy. He enters the workforce and starts to save some cash. And in 1972, he saves up about $6,000. And he's like, all right, let me try my hand at this stock market thing. People say that I need to go do it. Puts that money in, and boom, a 48% crash happens. Loses half of his money. Fuck, screw this stuff. That really sucked. I am swearing off the stock market. So continues to save outside of the stock market. And then he's just kind of hanging out, and then saves up a good nest egg, and his friends say, hey, look, dude, you're stupid. Try it again. He's like, all right, 1987 happens. Boom, he fires $46,000 in. And then boom, it crashes again, 34%. No, the stock market, no. He timed it horribly. Now he's like, all right, I swear off it. I'm going to go save more money. And then the internet happens. Like Mark Cuban's getting rich. He's seeing all these tech bubbles happening, .com boom. It's like, all right, I'm going to go take my nest egg that I saved, and I'm going to fire that in. 68K right in the market. Boom. Half of it goes away. And he's just like, oh, why do I do this to myself? Bad luck, Brian. And he's like, I'm going to swear off it. I swear, no more, no more. Saves a big nest egg. And then everyone's buying real estate. Everything's popping off, and he's feeling great. And he says, all right, I'm going to fire my next nest egg. October 2007, 64K back into the market. Boom, 52% goes away. Oh, why did I do this? And then saves the rest of his cash until retirement. And he fired $184,000 into the market, crashed it every single time, and decided to retire at 2013. How much did he retire at 2013? Guesses? Anyone guess? Numbers, throw numbers. All right. I won't, here it comes. $1.1 million. The only thing that he did so that even though he had those fat losses is he abided by one single rule, which is he never touched the money he put in. He never freaked out when the 48% crash happens. And he just said, all right, screw it, I'm going to leave it in there. Now, it might have been deliberate and he was smart luck Brian, or he just was stubborn and he lucked out. But this is the one rule. Like, you got to trust in it and fire it off and not look at it. Like, just let it be, let it go do its thing, and it will compound its interest and gains for you. And this is backdated to all of the sets of the stock market. Now, obviously, doomsday could happen, and past performance doesn't dictate future stuff, or whatever that quote is. But this is like hundreds of years of data. So unless like aliens come or whatever, like this is the one thing you need to subscribe towards. So when I talked about risk tolerance, there's a couple things here. The stock market might not be the solution for you to create passive income to cover your burn rate if you won't abide by this rule. And that's okay. Like, go real estate invest, go do something else. But this is the requirement that you need to subscribe to if you're going to go do this route. Now, what I will say is I will teach you the way to a championship portfolio where you don't have to do anything aside from plow money in. And that's what's coming through. But this hopefully emphasizes the power of the market. And even if it dips down, like, you can trust that it comes through so long as you leave it in there. Questions? Anything? Cool. And last year was a good example. Corona happened. It dropped like 35% in March. It ended the year at plus 15%. So if you just let it chill, you actually outperform the 7% average, so long as you let it roll through.
Hey, Chris, I don't know if anyone else. Thank you. So I've been told that when the market is generally down, that's when you should be buying more because you get more with your money. Is that true?
Yeah, yes, as well as you're trying to time the market at that point in time. So for me, like, some people do this dollar cost average thing where they figure out, okay, I'm going to put this much in and like try to optimize. For us, I just plow money in and forget about it. I just try not to go crazy and optimize and try to hold and put it in. So imagine you're like only going to do it when it's down, but it constantly goes up for 3 years and you didn't put any money in. You actually missed out on way more gains than trying to time the market and get it on sale. It's just like, just go buy it. And then you get more time in market, so it has more time to grow. And that's that philosophy around it. Cool. Is there someone else?
Yeah, I missed a little bit of what you were saying, but if you're putting money into the market through your 401k and whatnot, but then, like, for instance, if I want to get a rental property and have that as well, are you saying that we shouldn't be doing both, or you just shouldn't be pulling money out of the market, but you can do other stuff as well?
The latter. So never pull money from your 401k account.
Right.
No, you're doing penalties and stuff. If you pull money out of the market, have a reason for it. If you are going to go buy, like in your brokerage account, it's growing, you're not paying penalties, like that's the liquid account, and you do want to buy a rental property, yeah, man, go buy it. Like, go buy that thing. Know that it's not growing for you, or it's growing in a different way that requires you to like do work and stuff. That's a whole different thing. Like, you're investing in your own self as a real estate investor at that point in time. But this is more of like, hey, you pull it out and you're like, oh, okay, the market is really high and I think the crash is coming. Like, let me pull it out and hold it for 3 months and then see if the crash comes and then buy back in. Like, you're now being an active investor and you're gambling at that point. Like, what you should instead do is just fire it in and not even go work through it. Now, gotcha. I say no one beats the market and you're gambling and all that. I'm doing that. I set aside like money to go gamble when Corona happened, and I'm like trading and doing all this, but I know what I'm doing insofar that like I'm basically going to Vegas and I have the mentality of like, here's X dollars. I'm going to just like play in Vegas right now. And it's actually very fun. So like, I have a slide on that, but Kevin, to your question of like, Tesla is mooning right now and I could go make more money there. Yes, theoretically, or you could lose a lot more money. But that's a good transition into the next slide, which is a more foolproof ironclad way. And even if you don't want to pay attention or be an active investor, there's a way to win in the market. And this is what's coming.
Would you agree though that stocks like Tesla and Apple and Netflix, they tend to gain money over time? Would you agree with that they're safe stocks?
No stock is a safe stock unless you're diversified. And that's just really where it is. Like, it has worked really well. Now, what I would do is like, I would take a slice and put a gamble towards it. And like, it might be great, but I wouldn't put your whole nest egg in one place. But instead I put my nest egg in this allocation, what's coming up right here. So index funds are the way to go. And I'm going to do another illustrative purpose. And this is talking about free money that's on the table. And I've talked about how that's like a core philosophy here. Now, this isn't about free money. It's like both take free money and don't give away money for free. Now, this highlights the thing of no one beats the market. And if any fund manager is telling you they can outperform the market, like ask them what their insider trading thing is, because that's the only way. Now, that's an asterisk or whatever. Like they're crazy good venture capitalist people, there's investment bankers and all that, but we're normal people and we don't have access to those. But this is a philosophy I subscribe to. So instead, you go into your 401k account and there's 60 different funds and you're like, what do I invest in? The best way to do it, go to expense ratio, sort by lowest, and that's probably your answer. And this is sorted by highest. And if you look at Vanguard total stock right up here, they charge 0.03% expense ratio. This other one charges almost 1%. And if you look at the life of the fund, the Vanguard one outperforms it. So it's just kind of really highlighting the fact of like, there is a path, but just optimize for the guaranteed thing, which is fees, and minimize that. So for every 100K you pay in these index funds, would you rather pay $30 or $860 for a fund that returns less? Like do the $30 thing. Like that's really the path that you need to go. And this is again, like index fund investing. Cool. So this, like, as we're getting up to last 15, this is the simple foolproof way to have a championship winning portfolio, which is called the Big Three Fund. And if y'all are basketball fans, you know, Big Three, they win championships. You know, these are all really great Big Threes. They take home the trophies. So you may ask, what is the Big Three of your 3-fund portfolio? Well, of course, I use the Bulls people because they're the best original Big Three. But you have a total stock market index fund. This invests in all the US stock market, every single stock out there it invests in. And that's the diversification that you've got. Additionally, you invest in the total bond market of the US. Now, the difference between stocks and bonds, a good way to think about it relationally, is they tend to move in opposite directions. So when one goes down, the other goes up, and when one goes down, the other goes up. Bonds are like the safe old man route. They return 1% to 2%. They're very, very stable. Whereas stock market, you have a way higher ceiling, but you have more variance. So you try to make a good balanced allocation. And lastly, you hedge against the US with your international. So if Trump had gotten reelected, I don't know, I use an example, but basically like you want diversification in the world so that if a different world power comes into play, we're still doing well. So the 3-fund portfolio, this is the Vanguard version of it. You may have Fidelity versions, you may have, I don't know, different ones, but they in essence are the same. They have low expense ratios and you want a mix of total stock, total bond, and international. Here are the tickers for them. And you could just go allocate your 401k right now. Go take a look. VTSAX and VBTLX, and these are the expense ratios for it. So you notice it's pretty low. The difference between a mutual fund and an ETF, they're the same thing, essentially. They're investing in the same stuff, but mutual funds have a minimum that you need in order to invest in them, as well as equity traded funds or ETFs. You can buy and sell during the day, whereas mutual funds need to settle at the end of the day. Very small nuance, but nothing that you need to be concerned yourself with. Just see which one is available inside of your retirement funds and then just plow away. As well as in your brokerage account, you buy these 3 things and then you're good. So what I say with index fund investing is you fire the money in and never look at it. There's no sense in you pulling up the stock market ticker every single day because who cares? You're never touching this money for 20 years. So why go on an emotional roller coaster of like, it's up 30%, woo, 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 woo. And then it's like, it's down 20. like don't pay attention. Go spend that brain power elsewhere. Like go learn to surf or whatever. Just plow the money in, let it do it for you. Look at it once a year and see it, or look at it every once in a quarter. The thing to call out is your 401k. It won't always stay in the allocation you initially set it at. So you want to check it every once in a while because it will naturally move. So if you never checked it for 4 years, you might look and you'll have like 20% in a random ass fund. So you need to set up automatic rebalance so that it rebalances your allocation to the way you want it to. So that's something you should turn on. So go take a look at it and go from there. For time, I'm going to keep plowing and say this last thing, and then I'll take questions. So the question is, these are your 3 funds, but how much of each do you buy? And that's going to be a function of your risk tolerance and what you want to do. This is an example of an 80-20 percentage, 20% bond, 80% stocks. Some of the like forecast templates that I have use this allocation. If you noticed in the 4% safe withdrawal, they use this. This is a very like moderate conservative allocation. For the life of us, we were actually 100-0. So we never even invested in this 3-fund portfolio. We did 2-fund, total stock, international, and we're done. That is the degenerate, very aggressive route. It's paid off because the stock market's been awesome this whole like decade, but you do your own choice and your own risk allocation. There are some rules of thumb. They say like 20 minus your age is a good way to figure out your bond allocation. So for a lot of us, that might be 10 or 20. I didn't actually put us into bonds until our kids were born, just because I was like, let's settle down on the degeneracy a little bit. But this is something that you could go ahead and figure that out for you. Cool. Any questions about this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have the Vanguard mutual fund, but I have the VFIAX, and I see here you wrote VTSAX. Should I change it or what?
No. Okay, good question. VFIAX is the Vanguard S&P 500. And instead of investing in the total stock market, invest in the top 500 companies of the total stock market. We actually have both VFIAX and VTSAX. Because VFIAX is the more aggressive version of VTSAX because you're only taking the top slice. So you can get better gains, but you're also not as like diversified. So you can have a balance. You could just go full S&P 500, but they're a small, nuanced version of that. I think they have the same expense ratio. So I would just make a choice as a function of your risk tolerance.
Very cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? So the last statement I will say is don't be scared of the stock market. It's freaking easy and anyone can do the stock market. Just invest in these 3 funds and you are good to go. And then do other stuff. Just put your allocations and be happy. Put this in your brokerage. What I will say is there is, if you want to go deep into the nerd sense, there is a most tax efficient allocation whereby you put your international fund only in your taxable brokerage, you put your bond here, you put your stock here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but there is a most optimal way to put this stuff, but it is pinching pennies. So if you were to think about your portfolio, not just as your 401k, but a combination of all your accounts, which you should, you would then allocate it differently in those different sets of accounts. Cool. And then lastly, I said no one beats the market or whatever. I gave a little spoiler to this, but remember, like I'm saying, just do 3-fund, don't mess around. If anyone else tells you there's something better, they're just gambling, even though they say they're an expert or know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. So don't trust them, just do the 3-fund. But that's me right now. Tesla, Bitcoin, weed stocks, it's all I'm about. I do have a set of money that I'm playing with, but I do treat it like I'm going to Vegas. And I think that's the best way to do it is like, this is money I'm okay to lose, because then you can really go crazy and try to realize big gains. But this is just, again, where I'm calling it out. And Kevin, I don't mean to insult your friend, but it's just really like, that's the case. And he might be making really good gains, but do the 3-fund portfolio, have a slice to go play with, and then call it a day. It's kind of like poker, man. Like give yourself a
Well,
game, play with it.
I'd like to invest in weed.
What was that?
Do you invest in weed, the marijuana?
Oh, there's a ton of companies, like growers are now public. CGC, IGC, TLRY, like these are all weed companies. It is popping off right now, specifically today, or like a couple days ago when the Dems won the House. But like that's nerd shit. And if anyone is gambling too, like I'm more than happy to chat through that stuff. But just reinforcing, you'll get conflicting knowledge from people who say they know what's going on. Right when 2017 was happening, there was probably a ton of people on your social media feeds claiming to be like blockchain experts, and that was their job and stuff. Now, where are they? But maybe they're now back now that Bitcoin is at $36,000 or whatever. Cool. But that's it. And we're at 8 minutes. There's a couple intricate, like advanced stuff in here about like accessing your retirement funds early, as well as life insurance in my perspective on it. If that's something that you want to talk about, let's just save that on a personalized basis. But I'll pause here for any like kind of final questions. I know it was a lot of info, and what I will call out and offer is like, I love to talk about this stuff. So if you want to individually nerd out and build your baseline template and figure out when you want to retire and stuff, like let's hop on a call and have some beers and kind of geek out. But really the first step is figure out your spending, figure out your burn rate. Then you can figure out what your savings is. And then once you know what your goals are, allocate your savings accordingly. Cool. I will stop this share. And I just want to see your lovely faces. I'm going to snip a picture because this was like the biggest one of my classes, and this was very fun. So like, yeah, camera off. Yeah. Thank you guys for coming. This was really fun for me. And like, I plan on doing more of these at a certain clip. So if you've got friends and whatnot, like I'd love to like just spread the knowledge, because I think it's simple and very helpful and liberating. So something that I like to do. Cool.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. This was really helpful. And please let us know when you create your multi-level marketing station so that we could be the top tier.
Yeah. I mean, for a 0.0404% expense ratio, I will
10 friends.
Yep. Ahead a little bit off your guys' portfolio. Cool. So I'm here for questions if anyone wants to hang, but yeah, thank you all again for investing some time.
I don't want to hang, so I'm exhausted, but I need to hit you up for my RSU conversation. I had to Google that shit. So and my employee stock purchase, lots of stuff.
Cool. Yeah, Bray, hit me up. And
what's your hourly rate?
For you get the friend discount, the Patrick Mahomes discount.
Like a bottle of rosé. Or that be reverse. Okay, cool. But no, honestly, this has been awesome. So thank you so much.
Cool. You're welcome. Yeah, and any feedback is really helpful to make the class better. So shoot that stuff over. It's really welcomed. Feel free to drop off and like, yeah, throw questions my way if anyone's got any.
And Ty will be so thankful for his rehab after he becomes a crack.
I mean, he's got the mullet for it already. So.
Like a cash only cow.
All right, later, guys.
Hey,
thanks, Chris. That was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Chris, are you still at 714?
Yes. 345
7452.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sorry.
And then I was also going to ask, are you going to possibly send this recording out, which I guess I should have just hit record at the beginning, or just the slides?
Yeah, I'll send out the recording. I'll probably put it in a way that makes it easy for people to view, or maybe, yeah, I will put it just in the drive. So that'll be easy to go grab.
Okay. Yeah, I want my wife to kind of look at them. I just got married in October, and